What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as ever, I'm being joined by a guest. And today we're going to be doing, we're starting out, well, I was going to call it The Summer of Stallone, and it was going to be out released a little earlier, but didn't get around to it. So it's still going to be sort of the summer-ish of Stallone. We're going to do a little mini retrospective for Stallone films, independent sort of standalone films that don't usually get picked up in those franchise discussions. Well, we're going to be talking about Nighthawks, Cobra in this episode, and then later on we're going to be talking about Cliffhanger and Daylight. And I could not pick a better person to join me to talk about Stallone. I'm joined by Max Byrne. Max, how are you doing? You okay?
Hey, Scott. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for having me on again. Love being on the show. It's a treat and a privilege. And speaking of treats and privilege, what better to talk about than the great man himself, the icon, the myth, the legend that is Sylvester Enzio Stallone. What a guy.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we did recently, now that's what I call 80s action. And obviously, yes, you know, Stallone is a banner, marquee name of 80s action. Yeah. And these two, well, the second one, Cobra in particular, is sort of like, for me at least, like a go-to Stallone action film. It's, you know, there's a lot in there. But yeah, the thing, did you see the news about Sylvester Stallone, Suicide Squad, the achievement that Suicide Squad has given Stallone?
Yes, where he's had a #1 box office film in the last, is it the last
6 decades?
70s? Yeah,
it's
madness, isn't it?
Yeah, so for the last 6 decades, he's had at least one #1 hit film in every decade. Like no one else can claim that. So yeah. So I mean, you know, man's a legend. The guy is cool. You know, constantly working. And the thing, as I always say about Stallone, is like he gets panned. You know, people always sort of like pan his acting, all this other stuff, and which I think is a real shame because I think he's actually a pretty good actor. I think he's got some good comedy chops as well when used properly. But you know, people forget, like, he's a writer, he's a director, he's a producer. Like he's done, like, you know, worn many hats. Yeah. So you know, true sort of titan of Hollywood.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. He doesn't get the sort of fair praise he deserves, and is unfairly sort of labelled as a quote unquote, you know, sort of 80s musclehead, jacked up kind of guy, you know, one dimensional. And to that note, some of his films do sort of lean to that way, don't they? Of course, and you can understand that perception of him, but certainly there's a lot more strings to his bow than people understand. You know, multi-talented guy and a very intelligent guy. You know, he just perhaps his persona or his public persona perhaps doesn't lend itself to that. But I think, you know, like you said in the last time we talked, we were talking about, you know, him and Arnie and how we sort of see Arnie as more of an entertainer in his sort of canon of work, when Stallone is much more of an artist with what he brings to the table behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. And I just think he's one of the all-time greats. You know, he has done his fair share of awful films. There are some stinkers in his catalogue, and I'll freely admit that. But there are, you know, some absolute stone cold classics that just completely stand the test of time, repeat viewing. I think the man's a legend. I think he is a legend, and long may he continue. Maybe we'll get another decade.
Maybe,
of a #1 film.
How could that be? 7 decades. One of the things I would say is, like you say, you know, we talked about sort of the other, like Arnie's biography, Total Recall, that came out several years ago, is excellent. It's an absolute stonker of a biography. Covers loads of stuff behind, you know, both his acting, his politics, all this other stuff. Fascinating guy, fascinating biography. Stallone needs to give like, a biography like that. Like he needs to get on it, you know, because I think like he's got some stories to tell. And one of the stories would be including one of the women in, or some of the stories, I should say, involving one of the women in the films we're going to talk about. Bridget Nielsen, because they had a relationship sometimes. So, yeah, there's a lot of stories I'd love to hear him retell those. So anyway, cracking on. And blowing smoke up Stallone's arse enough for now. Let's really sort of back on and actually talk about the films. We'll carry on blowing smoke in a minute. But the two films we're going to talk about today are Nighthawks from 1981. Yes, 1981. Yep. And Cobra from 1986. And we're going to jump in and start talking about Nighthawks. So Nighthawks, Sylvester Stallone, Billy D. Williams, just after Empire Strikes Back, and Rutger Hauer. Really, I think that's sort of the main sort of cast.
Yeah.
Interesting film. So the film basically it's a New York set film. A terrorist played by Rutger Hauer is identified as having come to the States, and Stallone and Billy D. Williams are made to join a anti-terrorist task force to track down this guy. They are sort of like maverick cops that do all kinds of weird things, including dressing in drag to take down gangs in New York. And then the action ensues from there. But what's the action? But it's not. This isn't, a heavy-hitting, all-exploding kind of action film. This is much closer to a 70s cop thriller than sort of an all-out action blockbuster. So, but Max, what are your thoughts or first thoughts on Nighthawks?
Funnily enough, the first thing I wrote down ahead of this was, and it's something you've already touched on, is this looks, feels, and sounds like a 70s film.
Yes.
Although, it, like you said, it came out in 81, so it would have been made 80 or 81. It is literally still very much based in that 70s cop, hard-boiled thriller film. It's not, Stallone here is not the muscled action man. He's not the one-man army. That would come later. Obviously, that sort of 80s sensibility hadn't yet come to fruition by 81, I don't think. So that kind of action man, muscle man kind of thing hadn't really come to the fore. So this is like a very different sounding film. I mean, it literally could have been made in 1975. If someone said to you, this film came out in 75, it came out the year after Rocky 1 or something like that, you'd go, all right, yeah, I guess it is. You wouldn't question it, would you?
No. You'd watch this and go, like you say, you would see this and go, oh yeah, this is in the same vein of like Serpico or The French Connection. Like it exists in that world. And I kind of love it for that. Watching this, I was mentioning to somebody else actually today. I said, this film has reminded me how much I love grimy New York films, like New York of the 70s and those early 80s. Such a character, such a fascinating place.
Definitely, it looked like just a horrible, dirty, gritty, violent place to live, didn't it? It didn't look like the kind of, I mean, everyone dreams of going to New York, don't they? Wherever you come from in the world, it's kind of on your to-do list of places to go and visit, on a holiday or whatever, and see all the sights. But when you look at those 70s films, it looks like a terrible, terrible place to be. And obviously it isn't now. I don't want anyone to take the wrong end of the stick, but the way it's filmed and everything, it just looks like a dirty, horrible place. And funnily enough, you said obviously it looks like the world of The French Connection. Funnily enough, I don't know if this is true. I read this off Wikipedia, so if it isn't true, then obviously, but no, it'll be. But the guy who wrote the screenplay, David Shaber, this was originally planned as The French Connection Part 3, believe it or not.
Oh, really? I can believe it.
Yeah. So David Shaber, who wrote the script for Nighthawks, it said it was originally planned as The French Connection 3 and would have Gene Hackman's Popeye Doyle teamed up with a wise-cracking cop, possibly played by Richard Pryor, which obviously shoehorning Billy D. Williams there.
Yeah.
But Hackman was reluctant to make a third film as the character from The French Connection. So obviously that without Hackman, you've got no film. So the idea was scrapped. The film was scrapped. Universal acquired the rights to the storyline, and then Shaber himself reworked the basic plot into Nighthawks. So yeah, it could have been French Connection 3.
Well, it totally works because obviously the character of the terrorist, the Rutger Hauer character, is clearly he's a European terrorist. So that makes total sense. Having that in, and it's this idea of tracking him down in New York.
Yeah.
Not sure how I would feel about Gene Hackman in drag. I'm sure odd choice.
That's why I didn't want to do it. Maybe that was a deal breaker. Drag up at the very start and the very end of the film.
We're already building this. One of the things I was going to throw in later, but I'm going to do it now. Actually, is because you've just brought one connection. So this film, so Nighthawks started as one thing and became another.
Yeah.
So did Cobra. So both of
Nice.
these are films that have landed with Stallone having or been something else. So this obviously was the French, potentially was going to be the French Connection 3, and Cobra was his version. He approached, I think it was Paramount or whatever, with that being his version of Beverly Hills Cop.
Wow. Well, I had heard that he was before Beverly Hills Cop became what it did with Eddie Murphy, that Stallone was kind of linked to the project, but I didn't realize that Cobra was like kind of morphed from that. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, basically, he was given the plot and told to give notes, went away, rewrote it, and came back with Cobra. And they were like, no, that's not really what we want. We want something a little more lighthearted. We want this, we want that. And then, so he took it away, and Warner Brothers allowed him to make it, because they owed him a favor. So yes, that's two films. And the other thing I'm going to say as well, I'll throw it in now because I want to explain it later, is I in my head canon, although they have different names, I could see De Silva becoming Cobretti. Like I in my head, there's a story where these are a sequel to each other. And I'll get to that in a bit. But
Nice.
But yes, no, it's interesting that, like you say, Stallone sort of like morphing films from something else. But you're right. But this film definitely has that 70s sensibility. It's sort of, it's grimy, it's gritty. It's got the pace is, it's not all car chases and stuff. It's just got a couple of set pieces. It is sort of a detective story. Stallone going for that sort of like young Al Pacino look with the beard and all that kind of stuff. Is really interesting, and it was sometimes forgotten that it was that. So I really enjoyed sort of digging into this from a detective story point of view. What are your thoughts on some of the bits, like the fact that this film opens, the opening stunt or the opening gag, whatever you want to call it, it's weird because sort of like you watch the bit, for those that haven't seen it, if you've watched it, go watch it because we're going to spoil the crap out of this in a minute. But it basically opens with a woman getting out of a car and walking down the street at night in New York, and as Max has said, like it's portrayed as being this sort of like denizen of crime, this hovel of place, and literally within like 40 feet, like she's being followed, and people are about to steal her purse. But it's quite also clear that this woman that they're trying to hide in shadow as much as possible is pretty. I mean, not, let's say not ripped, but a butch, beefy kind of frame, and so it's suspicious to begin with. And then when someone tries to grab the purse, this woman nails them with the bag, and then pulls off the mask to reveal bearded Sylvester Stallone underneath. And Billy D. Williams comes out of nowhere, and it's slightly jarring from a tonal point of view, because I'm like, you sort of go, okay, the rest of the film is fine until the very end. We'll get to the end as well, but like it's just weird. Like it makes me laugh. I can't not laugh at this moment that they're trying to make you take deadly serious.
Yeah,
but you're like, oh,
definitely, yeah, because not only like you've just perfectly described the sequence of events, but then it's not just the fact that they take down the villains, it's the fact then the third one of the three that come is that he has to give chase, and he's chasing this guy up the stairs to like the sort of train station, subway station, in full drag, tights, skirt, cardigan, he's dressed like an old, he's dressed like an old, he's dressed like an old, and he's chasing this guy onto the train platform, where he eventually corners him at the end of this platform. And then he's like, yeah, come on. In typical Stallone fashion, he's like, yeah, come on, badass. Come on.
You ain't no man. Yeah. Come on. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Bring it on, badass, and all this. And he incapacitates the guy with the scarf he's been wearing as a woman. Yeah. He's got, he didn't think to like just put a gun in his purse or up his tights or anything like that. He literally takes this guy on and takes him out with the woman's scarf, and it's just bonkers. It's great. I mean, fair play to Stallone for be willing to do that as well. Yeah. Especially in his younger days when he was all about being macho and all the rest of it. You think perhaps now he'd probably do it more freely, but especially back then. I mean, granted, Arnie did it, didn't he, in late years in Total Recall? In Total Recall, of course, dressed up full drag. Well, kind of. But here, Sly. But it is just that scene of him sprinting after this thug dressed as an older woman. It is genius. But it kind of, in a way, it's very well to watch it with hindsight and watching it. I can't exactly remember the first time I watched it, but it's skipping ahead. But the end of the film, where he uses the same trick, if you will, from his repertoire to fool Rutger Hauer's villainous Wolfgar character at the end. And I don't know whether it's signposting it too much as to whether the grand reveal at the end, where you think it's Stallone's ex-wife who's about to get it in the flat, and obviously it turns out again Stallone again in lovely drag. Did it signpost it too much? I don't know. I'd love to get a first-time viewer's perspective on it as to whether showing him doing that at the start of the film spoils the tension at the very, very end, because you think he's going to turn around and it's Sly, and it is. I don't know. What did you think?
No, it's a payoff. I mean, it's like Chekhov's drag. It's that sort of thing of if you're going to dress up as a woman to catch criminals in the first act, you're going to do it for the third. It works okay. I'm quite fine. It's fine. Yeah. As you say, I think it's just sort of that thing of especially when he's sprinting across the train station, the train. It looks ridiculous. It pays off. Yeah. But there are other ways. Again, it's one of these things. When I watch this film, I'm like, I get what you're doing, but there are still other ways that you could have done this. Even in my own head, I was like, this thing of if you want to use a woman as bait, and he gets, then he gets pulled up for it, and it actually and then using his ex-wife as bait at the end of the film, and him coming out of nowhere and taking out Rutger. There's other ways of doing it, but it's fine. It's what they chose to do. Yeah. And it's also, the film is very much about disguise and hiding in plain sight as well. The whole thing of Rutger Hauer's character sort of after committing a bomb. It's in London, isn't it? He bombs a department store in London. Yeah. And then they have to give him some plastic surgery, and so the whole film is very much about disguise and all this other stuff. So it fits in with that theme and that motif. So, I think part of it is just the intensity that Stallone gives it as well, especially at the end where he just spins around and you've got this sort of blonde wig draped awkwardly over him, and he's got this really intense look on his face. And you think just pull the wig off, pull that wig off, because this scene looks a bit daft, ruining the tension. But it's fine, it works. Yeah. But I mean, what are your thoughts? You said that this film was originally going to be Gene Hackman and Richard Pryor, which would have definitely been more hand in hand with probably been. Well, to be fair, if that had been the case, would it have been the first buddy cop film? Because of course, the first buddy cop film doesn't come until the next year, 1982, in 48 hours. Yeah. So the idea of this sort of the black and white, cop duo, or and especially one with being a loudmouth, Richard Pryor and Gene Hackman. I do wonder if that was the original concept. If someone didn't walk out of that office and was like, "I'm keeping that," and then later on was Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. Yeah, could have been. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because this is ostensibly a buddy cop film. Him and Billy D. Williams. Obviously everyone knows him as Landau Calrissian, but he's playing a very, very different character here. There's not a lot of comedy banter between them, because this is a deadly serious film. I barely remember any jokes in this film, or any even moments of levity. It's deadly serious. I mean, when you first see them as well, Billy D, he literally has to be talked down from Sly from executing. You first see him, they go and bust up a crack den, don't they, or something like this, and they go in there, and Billy D. Williams is irate for some reason, and puts a shotgun in one of the crackheads' faces, and he's gonna blow him away. Because the guy keeps calling him a pig and all that, taunting him. He keeps saying to him, "How much to kill your pig friend?" He thinks he's corrupt, so he gets really angry about it. So. Yeah, no, like you say, there's no humor in this.
No, there's no comedy banter. Like you said, that would come the next year with 48 Hours. It's the buddy cops in the way that they're partners and they have a very effective way of working, but they're all business here. You know, there's no bants or anything like that.
I do love that moment though when they do, just before they're doing that, because they sneak in through the back, don't they? They sort of like climbed up the roof, and they come in through the roof and they sort of check each other before they go in. And then they go in, and then because they're both wearing these long coats, and so you think, oh, it's cold, it's New York, whatever. Yeah. And as they're going down the stairwell, it's really cool because, like you say, Billy D like reaches in and pulls out a shotgun, like a big proper shotgun out of his coat, and then Stallone sort of pulls this, like he reaches in and pulls this sort of string, and then that releases a massive gun that he's got as well that he's had draped around his arm. So, as you say, these cops aren't messing around. These are like those 70s super cops, you know, that sort of like, you know, I mean, they're leaning quite heavily again onto that sort of Dirty Harry kind of thing. You know, we don't play by the rules. We've got to be, you know, we've got to be out on the streets, you know, busting skulls kind of thing. But I do like them. Like I said, when that scene I think is really cool because the casualness with which they sort of reveal those massive guns, and they're just like, oh no, they've done this before. Like they are well, you know, versed in how to do this. It's really cool.
Yeah, you can tell they've been working together a long time, and they're like part of this street crimes unit, you know. And you see later them trying to do another bust where they're under that sort of subway tunnel, but then it gets ruined by a patrol car coming down, and then they're all the police are kicking off with each other. But it's quite established. And then obviously when they get recruited to this special anti-terrorist task force with the guy from the British, why someone from the British Metropolitan Police would be told to go over to New York to head up a task force. I'm not quite sure why, but nevertheless, but they when they're saying to their police captain, you know, why us? And he's like, oh well, they obviously, you know, these streets and your military backgrounds as well. I think at first, so maybe they've both served in Nam or something like this, you know. So they're well versed in it, you know, which obviously comes into play later. But no, I think they work really well as a pair. You buy it, don't you, as well? Yeah. They don't seem like an odd couple or anything like this. They seem like a really effective sort of unit, you know. It's good. I mean, I think, you know, unlike Cobra, where you get no backstory for Stallone's character, at least here there's a bit more meat on the bone, and the guy says, oh, your wife left you because of your dedication to the job. And we even meet the obviously about the end, we meet the ex-wife, Lindsay Wagner, and we learn that their relationship is, you know, there's still some love there. They're trying to reconcile, but obviously his dedication to the job drove them apart, you know. So there is a bit more meat on the bone of the characters, I think, in this film than there certainly is in Cobra, where they're pretty wafer thin, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, one of the weird things as well, you said it's been a 70s film. One of the key differences between this and, you know, when we get to Cobra and a lot of Stallone films, but I'd say even a lot of just cop films, is De Silva, Stallone's character in this film, isn't trigger happy. Like, although they've got all the big guns and they are kicking ass and other stuff, like you don't see them actually kill anyone. Like they are looking to take people in. That's the point.
Yeah.
And actually, it's called out, like when the Interpol guy or the Scotland Yard guy, sort of, they're having this conversation about being a terrorist or how you take down terrorists.
Yeah. And
I love this monologue about you have to be more violent than the terrorist. And it's just really, to be honest, living, you know, watching this and obviously recording this in 2021, and everything that's happened in the last sort of like 18 months to 2 years. You know, these things, scares of like police brutality and, you know, sort of these things. This notion of the police saying like, no, we are encouraging you to be more violent. You've got to be more terrible than the terrorists take on these people. Is this sort of, you know, it's clearly like a precursor to like, you know, police brutality and the militarization of the police. But I love the fact that Stallone steps up. But De Silva's like, look, I didn't join the police to kill people. I joined the police to save people, to stop crime. This isn't me. And so I love the fact that he's closer to like Rambo, you know, in that sort of, you know, he's trying to sort of like usurp these expectations. You think you expect him to be this gung-ho cop, And he's not. Like, he's there going, like, we might do crazy stuff, but I'm not here to kill people.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to do it. I won't take the shot. And then, you know, he sort of befriends this sort of guy from London. But he says to him, like, you've got 52 confirmed kills. And he says, like, you know, yeah, that was the military. This is the police. Like, he's drawn this line in his life. And I find that fascinating. Yet he is driven to it by the end of the film. And that's sort of the point that, but yeah, no, you say it just gives more to these characters. Like, you know, the Stallone character of this film is a lot, you know, has a lot more depth than I expected.
Yeah, no, it's a complete 180 from the other film we're going to talk about in a bit. Is that, you know, in that film he'll pull the trigger without even, you know, blinking an eye, whereas in, like you said, in this he really doesn't want to do it, and you know that ultimately the film's going to come down to that because he's the leading man, he's the star of the show, so it's only him who's going to actually kill the baddie at the end of the film, because that's what you do. So you know he's going to have to do it, and he, you know, even, well, not he doesn't pay the price, but obviously his partner Fox, Billy D. Williams, kind of pays, well, he lives to fight another day, but obviously gets badly cut up by Rutger Hauer and during that awesome chase scene they have through the subway, purely because Stallone was reluctant to take the shot and shoot him, because he's got he's holding a lady hostage in front of him with his knife to her throat. Obviously, if the shot goes awry or something, then he could have the lady's death on his hand. He won't take the shot, but he had the shot and he could have taken it and then saved his partner getting a horrific scar up the side of his face. So it all kind of adds to that, and then, like you said, the very end, the tension is, like you said, slightly dissipated with the, you know, banana armor wig, but it, you know, it all builds up to that, and you do feel the weight of it, really. And whereas Cobra has no weight, emotionally speaking, this film has plenty. There's a lot more to do in that film, I think, for Stallone. A bit more emotional heavy lifting, isn't there?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, you know, he has that connection with the Rutger Hauer character. You know, you have that feeling of, like, you know, they've got this nemesis kind of connection as building through the film. But even when, like, you know, Billy D gets sliced, he survives, he goes to the hospital.
Yeah.
As you say, they've had great chemistry. They work really well together. And there's a moment when, like, you know, Billy D sort of calls Stallone, he sort of to lean in, and you think he's going to say something reassuring, like, you know, you did what you could, you know, I've got faith in you. And he doesn't. He says, you should have taken the shot. So even his partner's like, no, you fucked up on this one. Like, it's on you. And, you know, it, like you say, it keeps adding this weight of, like, the world is applying pressure to Stallone, to Silva, to, you know, you've got to take the shot. The only way out of this is to take a life. You know, it's like you or him kind of deal. And so you're right, that ending when there's a reveal, when he does spin around in his you know, in his house coat and his wig. But it's you know, that aside, there is a clear moment in that, but you know the film's coming to an end. But there's still a second when you're like, is he going to take the shot?
Yeah, he doesn't blow him away straight away. He waits for Hauer to jump at him, doesn't he, with the knife? You know, to actually give him in effect, give him no choice but to pull the trigger.
He's looking for an out. He's looking for someone to know, because I'm convinced that, you know, for De Silva, the character, like, if Rutger Hauer's character had, you know, what's his name, Wolfgar, had surrendered at that point, like, he would have much preferred to have taken him in.
Oh yeah, 100%. He didn't want to kill him. That's, like you said, it's not his MO. You know, he's not that kind of person. So it was quite an interesting way to do it. You know, and yeah, it's a shame in a way it came down to that, because I suppose in a way, if he'd have been locked up, there was always maybe ground for some more. Because I think Rutger Hauer in this film is absolutely sensational. Yeah, I think
he really is.
It was his first ever American film. It was his US debut. Yeah, I think it Blade Runner, like the year after, 82, something like that.
It was filmed after this. It came out in 82. So yeah.
So this is his first ever American production, and he is just magnetic in it, isn't he? Yeah. He is superb villain. I mean, his character seems to have an irresistible sort of pull on women. He can, when he's trying to find a woman to sort of shack up with, to have like a safe house, he can literally just go to a nightclub and, you know, just so that you see him, he's just stood at the bar drinking champagne, isn't he? Just looking around the dance floor for a suitable woman, and then he sees one, he just goes over to her and starts chatting, and then Bob's your uncle. He is just a magnetic presence in this film, and such a great performance, such a cerebral villain as well, isn't he?
Well, and he's such a charming, like, you know, it's clear that he is a psychopath, but like he is endlessly charming in this film. Like you say, magnetic is a really good word. In some of the standoffs that they have, like you said, that really good chase that they have in the subway, and all of that, like, you know, he like you say, he's able to sort of, he's athletic and also, you know, he's capable of getting away, but he's brutal. Like, he's not scared of doing what is needed to sort of get away.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you know, they go for the act of terrorism at the end on the cable car.
Yeah.
And like just the way he talks to the hostages, like he wants them to know that he knows who they are. You know, he works around them and he's sort of saying, sort of, you know, he mentions people they know or their relationship and stuff. Like, he knows who they are, and he's just menacing, but like
he is
in that sort of like calm, very charming way. Like, you know, he is really good in this film. It's a great performance.
Yeah, brilliant. He is he's a great villain, isn't he? And
yeah,
like you're saying, in that cable car scene, there's moments of pure, like, not charm, but you kind of see a different side to him. Like when he's sort of going around it, he says to one of the women, he says, "Oh, I love your hat," you know, just out of nowhere. And then there's a baby in the cable car, and he says something like, "I don't want people to think I haven't got a conscience," or something like that. And he arranges, obviously, for the baby to be escorted out of the cable car and out of the situation, so no harm will come to it. So there's a weird kind of side to him, isn't there, where he's, yes, like you said, he is a complete psychopath. He's a fucking nutter. Yeah. But there's something going on. There's almost like a really weird, twisted sort of sense of morality there, almost.
Yeah, almost. But because he likes playing games as well, and like it's clear that he's zoned in on De Silva. Like, oh, you're the one that I'm going to try and really mess with. Because obviously, you know, that bit when they have the helicopter watching, and he says, you know, yes, I'm going to there's a child on board. There's an infant on board, and, you know, I'm going to let it go. Like you say, I don't want people to not think I've got a conscience. And he said, but I want him to come and get the baby. And Stallone's like, yeah, me. He knows what it is. And then when he gets winched up and they hand the baby over, then he gives him the letter. Like, this is what you've got to give to the United Press. Like, these are my demands, or you know, and this is my explanation. And there's a great line when he says, sort of like, you know, so you can drop the baby, but you cannot drop these. And, you know, he's being sort of like, you can tell that he's not, it's just joking, but like his delivery is so, like, again, like, you know, just sort of like menacingly sarcastic. Like, you know, he has an endless charm to him. I think he'd have got on with like Hans Gruber, you know, like,
yeah. I was thinking that myself, actually. He's almost like the prototype for Hans Gruber, isn't he? This sort of European, debonair, good-looking, well-dressed gentleman terrorist, so to speak.
Yeah.
He's not like some sweaty lunatic like in the Delta Force.
No.
You know, he's he's extremely erudite, charming, debonair chap, isn't he? But still a completely evil wronger, and got what he deserved at the end of the film. No question, for all the atrocities he committed. You know, terrible person. But there's that certain something, isn't there, where you want to see more of him, don't you?
Yeah. He's a character you would like to see more of, because he is so, like, you know, enjoyably arch. You know, he's sort of that Euro suave. That, you know, and he's obviously that confident, like, and, you know, it's almost. I love the fact that they don't lean into certain things. You know, there were some easy bits, like, you know, when the woman he is shacked up with finds his, like, case full of stuff.
Yeah,
she breaks into it, and it's like got grenades in and guns and all this other stuff. Like, the guy's not messing around. Like, the dude's like he is packing some heat.
Yeah,
and her excuse is so piss poor. She's just like, I saw it and I just couldn't help myself from looking, and you know, he sort of. The look he gives her, like, you know, I think other directors would have given it a line like, "Oh, you know, this is done. I'm so, you know, well, you know, curiosity killed the cat," or something like that. He just looks at her like, "I'm so disappointed." like, oh, now I've got to. But I'm not disappointed in you. It's more, I'm disappointed. Like, I've now got to go and find somewhere else to live. Like, you know, this is you've messed up this part of the plan. And so yeah, he is. He's very good in this film. I think I find him, like you say, endlessly watchable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought this film was sort of surprising to me for the reasons we said. Like, you know, I was thinking when I did this, I set it because I do like Nighthawks. It's been a while since I saw it. I thought I'll throw it in because it's one of those films that doesn't get talked about enough. And having watched this, I'm really disappointed. It doesn't get talked about more.
It doesn't, does it? When people talk about Stallone's canon and they go, "Oh, what are your favourite Stallone films?" No one ever says this, do they? Obviously,
No.
people go to the blockbuster Rocky and Rambo franchises, of course, because that's his you know, his main, what he made his name off. And they pull out other films, of course, but this one is such a sleeper in his sort of overall catalogue, isn't it? It's weird.
Yeah, and this is one of those films that, you know, like people talk about. I mean, you know, this isn't a masterclass. Like, it's not an acting masterclass. Like, you know, it's still a young Stallone, you know, finding his way. But you know, this is up for me. This is up there. This is something different from him. And you're right. I think this gets lost in that Rocky Rambo era. You know, like this late 70s, early 80s. Because again, like Rambo came out in 82, didn't it? First Blood.
Yeah.
And so that, which is the year after, and then just before this, you've obviously had like Rocky 2. I think Rocky 2 comes out in 81, so around or 80, so around a similar era. So yeah, this film just seems to get caught in the shuffle of those other films that people know a lot more, and it is a real shame. You know, I would definitely recommend people go check this film out. Like, it's not, like you say, it's not, you know, like a huge sweating action movie, but it's a really good, like, New York detective thriller.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's dated in the way it looks and the dialogue, and I want to mention, especially the music in this film by Keith Emerson, the British prog rock legend, God rest his soul. But the music is pure like 70s prog rock all the way through.
Oh yeah, I was loving it. Like,
I was tapping my foot to it. I was watching it the other night. I remember how Sarah was looking at me going, "You sad git," because she hates all that kind of music. Well, whereas I love it, you know. But I love all that, so it was great, you know. I mean, especially compared to the Cobra film, where the you know, it's just non-stop sort of 80s melodic soft rock all the way through, isn't it? You know, so it is kind of date stamped, this film, but I think it's great. I think it does hold up. I think the performances are good. It's well made. You know, it's well put together. It's like you said, it's not, if you're looking for a Stallone action film, you ain't going to get it here, but it's a good film with a good cast, and I'd watch it again on repeat. It's a really good, well-made film, I think.
Well, the film has several sort of, like, you know, it's not even like a straightforward film. Like, it has moments of twist. Like the end of the film, at one point you think like Rutger Hauer's won. Like, you know, he gets on the bus, you know, he's called for a bus, and you know, it's delivered, and then they drive it off into the river, and you're just like, hang on, what's going on? And you know, all the hostages and stuff. There's hostages and stuff on there, so in a way, like, you know, Rutger Hauer's character wins in parts of it. So it's not, you know, like a roo-ha-ha kind of film. Like, it's got darker moments, and it definitely, like you say, it fits into that 70s mold. It's probably one of the last, you know, the end of that 70s sort of, like, you know, era. After this, I think, you know, when you do think of the films after this, you couldn't do a film like this after 82.
No,
like after 48 hours, you would have to have banter, or you'd have to have, you know, a bit of sort of, you have all the action, or you'd have increased action, increased levity. After this, this film becomes Lethal Weapon.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. The times just changed, didn't they? This is kind of, it belongs to neither era. It's kind of in between the two, isn't it? This film, you know, it's kind of, maybe that's what explains why it kind of gets swept under the rug or lost in the ether, because it's kind of neither one decade or the other, if that makes sense. It came out in the 80s, but it's not it came out in the 80s, but it's not an 80s in inverted commas film, is it?
No,
it does, like we said, it looks like a 70s film, so it's kind of a film out of time, isn't it?
Yeah, it just missed its date, I think, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, like, so I think really for those listening, we've given an overview of it, but I don't think we've spoiled a great deal. There's still so much to enjoy from this film because it's worth seeing, even to see another side of Billy D. Williams as well.
Yeah, he is. He's great in it, isn't he? He is
Yeah.
great. I mean, we obviously everyone knows him as Lando Calrissian. That's the role he'll forever be defined by for the rest of his career, because that's by far and away his most famous role, and he's not had what you might call an illustrious career with loads of big roles. Obviously, Harvey Dent in Batman and things like that. But this is his character's a hard-hitting, kick-ass, swearing like a trooper, kicking down doors kind of guy. He's not what you've seen in other films. So I think he's great in this. It shows his versatility, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So no, I would say if you're a Stallone fan and you've never seen this, because I think it's one of those, it's the lesser known films, go check it out. I found it on I rented it on Prime for a couple of quid. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure you could probably pick up if you go on eBay or whatever, you can pick this up on DVD or whatever pretty cheap.
Oh, a couple of quid at the most on DVD.
Yeah. So
it's never had a Blu-ray release over here, but
no,
I'm sure one day it will.
Yeah, it must have. I was looking for it, and because there was actually after I watched it, I was like, I wonder if this has had like a sort of like Arrow do, or like 88 films, 101 films. Like, I wonder if one of them's actually done this. No, like this, but this film is ripe for one of those sort of like special editions. All the extras and all those kinds of things. I'd love this to get like. I don't, I'm not worried about 4K. Like, I'm not worried about them hunting down the negative to give it a big shiny release. But
yeah,
a decent Blu-ray release like this, I'd buy it in an instant. Like, I really would.
I would. Yeah, I mean, I had to get a German Blu-ray. I've got.
Yeah,
it has no extras on it. You have to go in and change the audio to English when you start, or else you get the whole film dubbed into German, no subtitles. So the only bad thing is when Howard meets up with, I can't remember the lady's name, but she's his co-terrorist, for want of a better word, and they have a tete-a-tete in a confession booth. I think they're talking in German, and there's no subtitles. So to this day, I've got no fucking clue what that discussion is, other than it ends with the trip for him to the sort of underground plastic surgeon to get a new face.
So just so you know,
I have no idea what to say.
that is literally what that conversation is about. You have been identified and you need to change your face. Right. And he sort of not rejects it, but he's reticent to do it, and she convinces him, and that's when he goes. Yeah, and so yeah, no, it's ripe for it. I don't think Arrow or anybody knows listen to this, but they should do. Because we always have great ideas on this podcast about the things they should be doing. But yeah, no, if one of those picked this up and did a sort of a Blu-ray release of it for over here, I'd buy that instantly.
Me too.
So guys, go out and try out Nighthawks. I think it's a great film, 1981. As I said, Sylvester Stallone, Billy D. Williams, Rutger Hauer. Great film. So we're going to jump forward 5 years, and what a 5 years it has been for Sylvester Stallone from 1981. I mean, he's already a name by 81. The Rocky films have taken him. He's already won an Oscar, but after that, he's had Rambo, Rambo 2. So Rambo First Blood Part 2. The rest of the Rocky films have come out by 85. They're up to number 4 by 85. So, Stallone is becoming a much bigger household name. Like, I'm trying to think of other films he's done by that point, but there are a ton. And so, as I said, he was offered this part of a film. I don't think it was called, whatever it was called, but Beverly Hills Cop was what it became with Eddie Murphy. And he took it away and he wrote a script. And that was then further tuned up, and it became Cobra. Now, Cobra was produced by Warner Brothers, but they didn't really want to leave it because obviously they'd done it as a favor for Stallone, and so it was distributed by Canon, Golden Globus, and so it sort of sits slightly adjacent to the Canon. And people often think, I thought for years this was a Canon movie, but it's not. It's just distributed by Canon. Yeah. And so, yes, Cobra, he, crime is the disease and he is the cure, as the tagline goes. And so Cobra is, again, he's a Los Angeles police officer now, Marion Cobretti.
What a name.
Yeah, yeah. And he's a badass, ass kicking, no rule breaking, no one tells him what to do kind of cop. That leads a sort of him and his partner are known as sort of again as sort of like these mavericks, and they're called the Zombie Squad.
The Zombie Squad, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a suspected serial killer in Los Angeles, but it's not. It actually turns out to be a cult of killers killing people on a frequent basis, and they end up targeting Bridget Nielsen when she witnesses them killing somebody in a car park, if I remember rightly, kill on the side. Yeah, sorry. And she escapes, and so she becomes a material witness to this crime, and so they chase her down, and eventually they move her out of the city into sort of the California countryside. And they pursue, and it goes to all-out war by the end. And Stallone sort of confronts the cult and the cult leader, played by, and I forget the guy's name. I only ever know him from the X-Files, but he was also a Schwarzenegger body double stunt man for a few things.
Brian Thompson is his name.
That's it. Yeah.
He's in the first Terminator film. He's one of those 3 punk rockers with Bill Paxton.
He is. Yeah.
He goes to say, "Gives me your clothes" and all this, and he, wash day tomorrow, nothing clean, right?
Yeah.
All that. Yeah, he's one of those.
Yes, he is. Yes, you're right. And so he pops up in all these films. But this film is very stylized. Like, it opens with people sort of stood in a filthy basement factory thing, cracking axes together to a sort of some rhythm thing. And then when it starts, like I say, it opens with like a statement of intent, doesn't it? Like one of these killers. I think the guy's supposed to be part of this cult. The guy in the supermarket.
Yeah.
Takes up like hostages in a supermarket and kills one guy. And all the police outside are like, we don't want to hurt you. We want to help you. And they're all trying to negotiate. And Cobra sneaks in and basically sort of levels, kills him. And you just straight away, you understand who this guy is. Where De Silva was reluctant to take the shot, as you said, with Cobra, you sneeze, you're likely to get shot at. So,
yeah, there's no hostage negotiation tactic.
No.
I mean, even after he shot him, he does the old Billy the Kid spinning the gun round on your finger before reholstering it in his pants. Yeah. So it shows how much that death weighs on his conscience afterwards. Not at all. He ain't haunted by any life he's taken, is he?
Well, even when he comes out and the press confront him, one of the press or someone says, even criminals have the right of protection by the law. And he grabs him and shows him the dead guy that was sort of killed, and he says, you tell that to this guy's family, and all sort of stuff. So you get where his bread is buttered, like you say. If you break the law, then as far as he's concerned, basically, this becomes a bit of a staple, because that scene of being set, again, it felt like there's more humor in it, but it felt like a replay, or was replayed, for Demolition Man, the start of Demolition Man.
Right, yeah.
When he saves the little girl, and the policeman says, how can you justify destroying a $9 million shopping mall to save one girl? And the little girl says, "Fuck you, mister." It feels like this becomes a bit of a Stallone staple.
Yeah.
But yeah, what are your thoughts for Cobra overall as a film? As you say, it doesn't carry the emotional weight of the first film, but
no, it's kind of standard mid-80s action fare, if that makes sense. I mean, what's interesting, that film starts with a bit of a voiceover from Sly, where he comes out with some statistics. There's in America, there's a robbery. Yeah. Obviously, I can't remember the exact time, so no one shoot me for getting the stats wrong, but he says something like, there's in America, there's a robbery every 12 seconds. There's a rape every 30 seconds. There's a kidnapping, every so often. And it's all in slow, while the slow motion close up of his gun, it kind of just tells you where
the handlebar, doesn't it, along the barrel?
Yeah. It kind of tells you where the film's going before you even see anyone. I mean, it's kind of using those stats to justify their actions for the ensuing 90 minutes, isn't it? Saying, well, this is what's happening in the world. This horrific stuff is happening all the time. So you need men like Marion Cobretti, who has a literal take no prisoners approach.
Yes.
This is the only way. It's the only way you're going to stop them, you know. And there's that whole back and forth with the guy who funnily enough, is from one of your favorite friends, plays Larry Cotton in Hellraiser, doesn't he?
He does.
The other guy who's like the pen pusher, police guy with the glasses.
He's perfect as well in this film. He's such a knob in this film. He's so
he's a dick,
well cast. Yeah,
he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's like the sort of antithesis, the sort of complete opposite of Stallone's character. He's the man in the suit and the glasses, the pen pushing policeman, the by the numbers policeman, not Stallone. But like Cabretti's like this sort of typical 80s cop figure, really. Lives in a shithole. You know, the missus has probably done one because of, you know, he was always on the job or whatever. But, you know, total badass. And these cops, despite the fact they live in squalor, they always have great cars, don't they, as well?
I was going to say,
they always drive a great car. I mean, in this one, it's, you know, even has a nitrous oxide, you know, Vin Diesel, Fast and the Furious thing, which he uses later on to get the edge in a big car chase with the baddies. So they always seem to have, I guess that's why they can afford these cars, because they live in squalor and spend all the police salary on these beautiful cars. But he is, isn't he? He's kind of, there's no, like we said, the character he plays in Nighthawk, Dick De Silva, is a three-dimensional character with backstory and relationships, whereas Cabretti is literally just, you know, cookie cutter 80s cop. Great. I still like it very much. And, you know, Sly's great as always in this film, very charismatic, but there's not much behind what you see on the screen, is there really?
No. I mean, they at one point they do try to give him some depth when there's a conversation at like when they are traveling with Bridget Nielsen later on. Yeah. And his partner says, you know, if you want to know anything about his past, go call him this. And he's like, oh, what's that going to be? And she goes up and calls him Marion Cobretti, like she, you know, acknowledges his name. And he says something about being tough, and he says, "Well, try and be," you know. She's saying, you know, I have to be tough. He says, "Well, try growing up being called Marion." That's about that's about it. That's literally the background you get, and you go, right, okay. I was convinced before I watched this. I was convinced in my head, and I remembered it. And obviously, it doesn't happen. I thought there was a scene in this film where they talk about how long they've been partners. You know, this thing of sort of like, you know, the usual thing of like, you know, we've been partners for 5 years, and you know, you're going to leave me on the outside, kind of thing. I just for some reason assumed that was in there because it's such a cliche, and this film is loaded with so many cliches. And there's not even that like between him and his partner. Like they're just sort of, his partner's a complete like non-event.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. He's kind of there just to be there, isn't he, really? You know,
well, it's almost like, well, we know the police work in twos, so he has to have a partner.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we have to give him anything to do.
No, he literally there's nothing apart from get shot near the end, although doesn't die, which I kind of remembered him dying, but when I rewatched it this week, I was like, oh, he actually survives. Oh, fair play to him. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the characters just kind of don't massively enhance the plot, do they? You've just got Sly, you've got the damsel in distress, you know, his then wife, obviously, and then obviously Brian Thompson, who's a complete 180 from Rutger Hauer's character, who's charming, cerebral, debonair. This guy's just a sweating lunatic, isn't he? Who's just sort of, you know, barely says anything. We never hear what his name is. He's just called the Night Slasher or the Night Slasher. Yeah, the Night Slasher. So even his people in his cult never refer to him by his name or anything like this. So you don't know what his deal is, why he's formed this cult. You know, what's driven him to it as such. At least I don't recall that being the case.
No, it's never explained. Yeah, and again, like you say, it's interesting that they pick him because there were several scenes when I was thinking, are they trying to emulate something? So there's a scene. I mean, let's be fair. This film, it's a cop film. It's a cop action film. It ends as a cop action film.
Yeah,
but it is a cop action film in a slasher movie.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what when I watched it. This is the first time I really thought about it. So there's several scenes where I was like, these deaths are very like, you know, if they were all done by the same person, like you could put a costume on one of these people and it would be a slasher film. Like, you know, you could see your Michael Myers or your Jason or whatever. So there's a one where they bump in, they bump the back of this woman's car on the side of the street. I think this is when when Bridget Nielsen this is the murder she witnesses. And a woman comes over and she says, I can't believe you hit me. You've been drinking? And she's like, oh yeah. And then a guy comes in, they tack her in the car, don't they? And she's sort of all wild eyes and stuff. And it's surprisingly like you don't see a great deal, but it feels brutal because it's sort of like it's quite visceral and quite kinetic. And then later on, when Bridget Nielsen's in the hospital and they find out where she is, and you've got Stallone like charging over there because he finds out that they found out where she is. But like, and you say that the night slasher's in that janitor's uniform.
Yeah,
him stalking the hospital is incredibly similar to. It made me think of like say Halloween 2, but also like the Terminator. Like him just sort of calmly walking around the hospital and eventually realizing that he can't go against the flow of the people because she sets off the fire alarm and he just gives it and walks away. I was like, that's a very logical response. Like, have they chosen him because they couldn't have Arnie? Like,
he just kind of had that sort of muscle-bound, monosyllabic kind of thing going on, doesn't he? He's kind of a nondescript character, but it kind of works, doesn't it? I think in the context of the film, he is kind of genuinely scary in a couple of parts, especially when he's walking around the hospital and he's dyed his hair black to try and be unrecognizable, like that's going to change it. And he's you think he's going to about to kill that nurse in the lift as well, but obviously she gets out just before he knifes her, and he, like you said, he is like this horror movie character, isn't he? Stalking his prey. It's a weird kind of, he's not like a typical 80s action movie villain, really. So in that respect, I quite like it. In that,
it's interesting
about it more now. Yeah.
Again, like they've done something different. They've done something interesting. So I kind of relate it. I respect that. I kind of like that they've done that. I find that fascinating. But again, that they miss things that I think would have been even cool. Like you say, if they'd given more depth to like why are these people following him? Like if he's like, if they're going to try and set him up as the next Charles Manson, why they? Because in that opening scene, when you have them all like with their hands over their head and they're clacking the axes together, it pans across like the people that are there, and you see him, sort of like he's there, but then you see like there's a younger woman there, in a blue dress. Then there's all these people that look like bikers, and these are the people. Then they say there's this woman in a blue dress. There's an old man in a suit, and so you're going like, who are these like regular people that have been attracted to this weird death cult? Like, I want to know like why. What's the story for this cult? But they just become sort of like fodder, don't they, for Stallone later?
He must kill about 20 of them on his own at the end of the film. 20 to 30 of them get shot by Sly or eliminated in the factory at the end. But it would have been great to sort of learn a bit more. I mean, they're sort of like this cult who want to sort of kill everyone who they see as weak, don't they, or something, to leave the strong to sort of rule the earth. They've got a big job on their hands then if that's what they're going to do. It's going to take a lot of years, but that's kind of like their MO. But like you said, how and why do you join? Like you said, the old geezer in the suit. How did he get there? And he might have that outlook on life, but then how do you sort of stumble across a cult like that when you're a man like that? How does that work? They just kind of arrive fully formed and all die, don't they, really? Which is a shame. I would have liked to have seen a bit more. Yeah,
there's more to it, and it is, let's say, it's a bit like it's two-dimensional, a bit wafer thin. But I mean, the thing is that this is all set up for action. But I do like some of the horror elements, like again, when Bridget Nielsen's trying to escape in the car park, because she's a model, isn't she? And so her friend or photographer, whatever, gets killed, and then she's on the run and stuff. Like, again, that scene's really good. It's well set up as like a horror. She's been pursued by a bunch of people with axes and stuff. Like, it's intense enough to. I mean, whilst in the previous film, like I was invested in the characters and sort of like say it's a thriller and you sort of enjoying the plot and you carry it. I'm enjoying the intensity of the action with Cobra. Yeah. That's the sort of what's driving the roller coaster in this case.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's weird though, isn't it? There's kind of I remember at one point there's the weirdest montage in the film, which is such a weird juxtaposition. You get this sort of 80s rock song playing, and it's like a three-way montage of Brian Thompson murdering people, Stallone and his partner sort of going shaking down people, trying to get some info. You know, they've been told to go and hit every shithole in the city and see what you can dig up on these guys. And then the third part of it is Bridget Nielsen modeling the weirdest modeling shoot where she's posing with robots. I mean, what's going on? What is she selling? Robots?
They were left over from Rocky IV, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Paulie's ex-girlfriend or something. But I don't understand that. Like she's kind of like in swimwear or dresses, but like posing with robots. So what that was about? I have no idea. But it's such a weird clashing together of people doing different things that don't tonally fit against some like inspirational 80s rock montage music. It's so weird, but I do like it.
it's interesting. It's the moment in the film. It's probably, there are two moments in this film where you do go like, "What the fuck is going on?" Like, I don't understand this, and that is the first one when you do, because it's one of those montages where you just go like, "Eh." I don't, what? Like, it makes no. It's a montage was incredibly 80s. It's clearly one of Stallone's favorite things. But that one, it's like the music fits her modeling. Like, you know, if it was a romantic comedy or something else, it would be fine. But when you, as you say, when it's juxtaposed against like this guy killing people and then these cops shaking people down, you are like, eh?
Yeah, it doesn't quite go, but.
No,
you know, you can nitpick a bit too much, you know, but it is what it is. But the guy who's like the photographer, I've never wanted a guy to get killed so much in my life, because he spends that entire 2 minutes basically telling her that she must sleep with him for the good of her career.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, in this day and age, that's not really going to fly at all. But he's literally saying, "Look, I'm your photographer. I'm telling you this. It'll be good for your career. You just," I'm not asking, he says, "It's not like I'm asking you to marry me." I think he says at one point. Literally, he's literally saying, "Look, love. Let's just get it over and done with. Sleep with me, and your career is going to really." You know, go places. I mean, that's very 80s kind of parlance. You couldn't really have that in a film now.
Well, I was going to say, considering again, you know, considering the year in which we're recording this, and obviously, you know, post Me Too and all those other things and the revelations, it tells me that there were certain people in Hollywood that to which these things were never revelations. It was always a case of like, well, no, that's just how we did business. And if you watch certain films in the 80s, it's blatantly obvious that that's what happened. You know, yes, I'm photographing you, but you know, if you were to sleep with me, I can guarantee the best photos are the ones I share.
Yeah,
it's all very it feels sleazy as hell. But yeah, it's weird. Because she's sort of like, you know, she's not bad in this. I mean, I've never found Bridget Nielsen to be a great actress.
No. She's not terrible, though, is she?
No, she's not terrible. She's perfectly, you know, acceptable. I mean, if you ever watched Red Sonja, like, you know, one of her first films, like, you know, she's a lot better than that. Yeah. And that was only 84, I think. So that's, you know, she's in a couple of years, she's sort of come on pretty well. But the other thing that I find weird is them, you know, when they're traveling, they have that sort of, they try to have this sort of lighter moment when they're having chips and that thing, and they have this sort of conversation, and it's this sort of like breaking the tension and stuff. But the whole thing feels again sort of like it sort of stops the film dead. Like, for this moment, you're like, you don't need any of this. Like, everything you're trying to do here could be compressed into like 3 minutes somewhere else. And it almost feels a little bit like as they were driving along to a set, they're like, hey, look, roadside shop, let's film something here. I don't know why, but that whole scene really jars with me. It's just very bizarre.
It serves no purpose, does it? And you know, this poor woman's been traumatized and seen people murdered, and people are literally chasing her down to kill her, so she can't finger them in court. And you know, for literally no reason and in no time at all, she's fallen for Corbett as well, isn't she? Yeah. They're in this motel, and she's like saying, when this is over, I'd like you and I to, you know, spend some time together or whatever it is she says, and he's like, I don't think that's a good idea, you know. And she's like, I do. And then obviously they have a little snog before the baddies turn up and ruin it. But it's, you know, you can tell obviously, like,
it's cliche.
It was kind of a thing back then, wasn't it? That the damsel in distress would fall for the badass hero by the end of the film, no question, you know, and that would be how the film would end, with them two in together, or at least sort of romantically involved, you know. So it's it's kind of script writing 101, isn't it, for a 80s action film?
I mean, weirdly, it is. I mean, you know, in many ways, I've literally just thought that this film basically is the Terminator, but just from a slightly different perspective. You know, it's you know, Stallone as Carl Reese, Bridget Nielsen as Sarah Connor, and then your man who looks like Arnie, being the Night Slasher, being the Terminator, coming after him, just with a lot more characters. So, yeah, you're right. It's, again, like I say, I'm fully expecting it. It's just that scene, the way that scene plays out. It's like, as you said, this film again is deadly serious. They've it's not full of banter. It's not full of, like, you know, and then they try and have this lighter moment that comes out of nowhere. You know, there's no precedent for this in the film.
No, it's kind of weird.
Even there are several moments of dialogue as well that do the same thing. There's a moment, and you know, when he's having that, they're all in the office, and they're basically chewing out Cobretti for what he's done, for the way he does things, saying that he needs to do it this different way, and they tell him, in the end he says sort of like, you know, he says, you're listening. He's like, yep, totally, yeah. And he actually admits we've got a photo of what we suspect the killer looks like. He says, why haven't you shared it? You know, you're a rogue, you know, blah, blah. And then as he leaves, like, this thing's all been dead serious. Like, you know, he's squared off with some of them and all this other stuff. And then he leaves, and his captain says something like, he says, like, you know, Cobretti, you've got a bad attitude. He says, yeah, just a little bit. And it's like, is it supposed to be a joke? Like, are you trying to have a comeback? I don't know what that line is about. It's it's so badly, you know, the delivery's awful. It's, you know, for Stallone, it's sort of like, I don't know whether he's trying to be funny. I don't think he knows. Like, he's that thing where he does his line, he's like, because Cobretti doesn't joke at any other point in the film.
No, he doesn't. He's a very stoic guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
He doesn't smile.
No. So there's a few moments like that where you're like, like, you know, this needed a little bit ironing out. But overall, though, I have to admit, like, I do kind of, there's something about Cobra that is incredibly enjoyable, in that, as you said, like, cookie cutter sort of like 80s action kind of way.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it kind of falls between being, like you said, almost a horror-ish kind of film with a bog standard 80s film. I mean, I did read somewhere that there's like it's never been released or anything. You're talking about obviously things getting re-released on you know, sort of Blu-ray and that. This film never has been released in an extended version, but apparently there's a bootleg rough cut out there that's over 2 hours long. Because this film, when it was first put together, the assembly cut, the American censors gave it an X rating because it was so incredibly gory and violent. So they cut loads out. I mean, if you go, obviously we'd be here all night if we went through it, but honestly, if you go on Wikipedia, it literally, there's like a page and a half of A4 of all the things that were cut out, just more violence, more gore. So they literally had to take so much out just for it to get, so like.
Is it more like the slasher killings and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Like, even sort of when the, you know, spoilers, the Night Slasher does die at the end, boys and girls. But it says here, one of them, graphic close-up of the Night Slasher's wound after he is impaled on that hook. Cobretti repeatedly forces the hook deeper into the Night Slasher as he screams in pain. And there's loads of that stuff in there. Extended death scenes, the photographer we spoke about, the sleazy photographer, extended death scene for him, in which he is hit several more times with axes and attempts to escape, only to slip on his own blood and fall down in a puddle of it before being finished off with even more axe hits. So it was a really OTT.
I want to see that. I forget the Snyder cut, forget the Ayer cut. I want the full Cobra cut. That's what I want now. # release the Cobra cut. That's what I'm going to go for now. That's amazing. I didn't know that.
I know. Yeah, yeah. It says here, no uncut version or director's cut has ever seen an official release. A time-coded work print sourced from poor quality VHS copies exists as a bootleg. Contains all of the X-rated scenes and uncut action sequences, along with, and you'll like this, along with scenes explaining the motives of the New Order gang. Yeah?
See, that would have been useful.
Yeah. Focusing on characters such as the Night Slasher and Stork, who was the bent policewoman who was part of the gang all along, alternate lines of dialogue, and a temporary score which contains some of the songs and music from the theatrical version and pieces of scores from. I mean, what are we missing?
Well, the thing is, I always think about this, because we've got such great, the technology for the restoration of films now is so good. Like, there's a film called Nightbreed for anyone listening. I don't know if you, So Clive Barker's Nightbreed. Was when it was released was attacked because it wasn't very good. The theatrical release is fine. It barely makes any sense towards the end. But Clive Barker was always like, no, that's not the film I intended. And so they for years he was, I've lost all the footage. And then they found it, and it was like, I think it was a VHS copy and a bunch of negatives they found, and they released the cable cut, or the Cabal cut, I should say.
Yes.
And that's now been released, and sort of Arrow did it, and a few others did it, but like, they cleaned it up as best they can. And if you watch it, you can see a variance in the quality of the film, but not enough to worry about. But it makes the film like 10 times better because it provides so much more information, and it's wonderful. Like, you can do that. That was from a video negative and from a VHS copy that was kicking about. Like, yeah, give me the Cobra cut. Go find this bootleg, clean it up. Let's put it in a bit of CG. Take the timestamp out. I'm sure we could do it.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, apparently as well, it also, talking about lack of backstory, apparently it also alludes to Cobra's sort of ex-girlfriend or ex-wife being killed by some violent criminal years past, So again, that would help to really flesh out, put more meat on the bone and actually help us understand what's going on a bit more. So there's so much that was shot and just for whatever reason cut, or obviously they had to cut the violence, but then there's other stuff where it kind of expanded on the story and gave you better characters, but they obviously just cut it down as well for whatever reason, maybe time constraints. They didn't want,
right. Maybe Sylvester Stallone. Mr. Stallone, listen here. All right. I know you are currently working on your re-edit of Rocky IV.
Yes.
And so if you can do that, and I am very, very much looking forward to that, I will be buying that as soon as it comes out. Next project for you, find this footage and I'll do a bloody, what's it called? Kickstarter. Find this footage and let's do the Cobretti cut. That's what I want to see, the Cobretti cut. I'm going to get that trending. But that's fascinating. I didn't realize there was that, but I want it now. I want that in my life.
I want to see it, yeah. I don't know how one goes about finding these bootlegs, but someone must have a copy somewhere.
It'll be in someone's office.
It must look awful, if it's off a poor quality VHS, but it's better than nothing. And like you said, someone could clean that up and make it watchable.
Even if it ended up being just like, here's all the deleted scenes on we're going to do a decent Blu-ray edition of this, and here's all those deleted scenes that were missing. Yeah. Cool. Like, I'd want to see that. Yeah, but this is a good film. I do enjoy this film. Like, it's a bit daft. It's a successor to Dirty Harry as well. That there's definitely that sort of in its blood. So it's it has all these things, and it's very much of its age. Because you and I, Max, are children of this era. These films we've talked about sort of like would have been in our blood from when we were young. And I do wonder if we were to show these two films now. So I'm talking to my younger audience. Considering like this podcast is called 20th Century Geek, I don't know how many there are, to be honest. They're all 40 plus year old men sort of going, yeah, that was ace when I was a kid. If there's anyone out there younger than in the sort of that's never seen these films, quite young, knows Stallone more from, say, I don't know, mid 2000s onwards, go back and watch these films. And I really want to know what you think. Like, go back and watch Cobra, go back and watch Nighthawks. Let us know what you think. Because these are doozies. I think these are both like, they're very different, but they're really good films, worth checking out. Any other thoughts on Cobra?
I just think it's just a very much a product of its time, isn't it? It's not by any means a great, what you call a great film. It's not one of Stallone's, I don't think one of his best. You know,
No.
if someone said, name your top, say even your top 10 Sly films, I'm not sure this would get in there, to be honest with you. I'd have to think about that, but I think it would be just missing out. I'd rate Nighthawks above this, let's say that.
Oh yeah,
I would do that. But I mean, it's fine for its era. I mean, it's not, you know, a terrible film. It's well made. I mean, the action's decent enough. Like we've just said, obviously there's just too much taken out of it that would have made for a better film, and that film does exist somewhere. So let's see it. But it's okay. It's okay. It's you know, it's Sly doing what Sly did in the mid '80s, being you know, kick-ass, no nonsense action man like all his contemporaries were doing at the same time. If somebody says, let's put on a kick-ass 80s action film that we don't have to think about, we can just chill out for an hour and a half and just enjoy it, can't go wrong. You cannot go wrong with it. So it is what it is.
It's the peak of machismo, isn't it, this film as well, for Stallone? Like, you know, everything from his costume, the car, the weird way he eats pizza. I don't know if you noticed that when he goes back to his apartment, he takes a slice of pizza out and then cuts the end off and eats that.
Yeah, weird. Yeah,
it's like, I reckon that was Stallone improvising, and they're just like, we can't afford any of the film. We'll just go with that scene. That'll do. Yeah, it is good. Now, there was something I wanted to say. Like, I was thinking in my head as I was watching this and Nighthawks. I in my head, I was trying to think, like, can I make this in my head canon? Can I make these two films that, like, you know, connect them?
All right. Yeah.
So here's my attempt. Following the events of Nighthawks, where De Silva was forced to make that decision and take the shot, killing Wolfgar, it sends De Silva into a bit of a sort of a spiral where, instead of, you know, having lost his sort of like that, the Metropolitan Police mentor, and, you know, having to kill Wolfgar and sort of, at this point now, Billy D is, you know, doesn't fully trust him. There's a bit of, you know, tension that in that sort of relationship now because he didn't take the shot. It starts to really wear on De Silva to the extent he starts to sort of become a bit more brutal and a little bit more sort of handy with his gun. And the New York police would be like, look, you're trying to do, you've got to hold back. Come on, you're not the man you were before. Like, his ex-wife no longer wants anything to do with him. Know what you've just said, because this fits into what I was thinking. She ends up trying to support him, and they sort of, you know, they're trying to reconcile. Because there's a whole film that exists in between all this. Like, because of what happens with the gang, she ends up being killed, which pushes him over the edge. And so what happens is he decides that he can't live and work in New York anymore, but he still wants to be a policeman. Still wants to be a copper. So he moves to Los Angeles, and they agree that, you know, for his protection, because of the events of what this thing happened with this New York gang, he has to change his identity. So he changes his identity, and someone chooses for him the name Marion Cobretti. And so he's stuck with it because that's the identity he's now been given. And so he joins the Los Angeles Police Department. But this attitude remains. He's got enough distance to carry on, but he joins this thing like the zombie squad, where he's going to just keep trying to take it out. And he isolates himself. So he always keeps himself slightly distant from his partner, and takes on this sort of thing of, you know, and that leads up to Cobra. And so I was like, yeah, that to me, this is the same guy, and he's just gone through it. There's a film or something in the middle that leads between the two. I know it's complete nonsense, it's complete headcanon, but, like, you know, if we can do that with Star Wars, an extended universe and fanfic, this is my Cobra Nighthawks fanfic.
It works. I take my hat off to you. It does completely work, and you can almost see that connective tissue between the two. You know, granted that, you know, it's two different characters, but it does work. You can almost see that transition, and, you know, the 5-year period would work for the sequence of events you just laid out as well. So it could happen. It could happen. There's definitely something in that. You know, if they ever decided to have done a sequel to Nighthawks, involving the De Silva character and what
Yeah,
become of him, you could quite easily have seen him transitioned into Marion Cobretti.
So not only am I asking for the extended cut of Cobra, I now want to write the interquel, as they call it. I now want to write the interquel comic that covers this. So yeah. Look out for that Kickstarter. Here I come with 2 projects that I'm pretty sure no one really wants other than me.
Oh, well, I want it, so that's 2 of us.
Excellent. That's a tenner. We're all in.
Yeah, great.
Right. No, excellent. But yeah, Max, it's been great talking these films. We sort of, our summer of Stallone has started. We've done some 2 darker films, really. I think this works out quite well because it's 2 quite dark films that, edgier in that sense. But I've enjoyed talking about them. And, again, I'm going to recommend both of them. People check them out. But we're not over. We're not done. We are going to a slightly lighter tone, really. And we're leaving the 80s, and we're going to go to the 90s. And we are going to be talking in the next episode of our Summer of Stallone. We are going to be talking about 2 more sort of standalone films: Cliffhanger and Daylight. Some very, very different films. A 90s Stallone. We shall see what we think of those. But Max, any final thoughts before we leave our lovely listeners?
Just that these are 2 great films that deserve an audience. People should seek them out. If you like Stallone, like as we said earlier, Stallone has had this unbelievable career where he's still starring in box office worthy movies. Granted, in the next one it's voice work, and he's not physically playing a humanoid shark. But that's unmistakable to his voice anyway. But yeah, if you're a fan of the man, and like you said, if you're not, if you're slightly younger than you and I, and you know him from his sort of last 15 to 20 years work, which is also brilliant. Go back and check these films out. You'll be so glad you did. They're great, and so Nighthawks is easily the better of the 2. That's such a well-made film. But again, Cobra, just pure escapism, pure fun at the end of the day. That's sometimes lacking in today's films. It's just pure fun. You don't need to think too much about it. So get out there and get them. You can pick them up for next to nothing on DVD, and they're probably on streaming services as well over here in the UK and in other countries. It's probably very easy to track down a version to watch, and I think they're probably on TV quite a lot as well these days. So get them watched is all I can say.
Yeah.
You will not regret it.
No, I agree. Definitely. Start out, go watch some Stallone. Brilliant. Right, Max, before we get into where can people find you, and what should they be listening of you?
If you want, you can find me on Twitter at MaxyByrne, which is spelled MaxyByrne. If you go there, there's links to different websites I write sort of comic book reviews and articles for. Check those out. And then there's a link to the Comics in Motion podcast feed, which my podcast appears on, Mandatory Marvel and DC, which of course, Scott, you've been on, and we'll have you on again very soon, I hope, which is basically just me and a guest, or sometimes guests plural, where they pick a book or a story arc from either Marvel or DC that they particularly like and enjoy, and we talk about it for an hour or so and talk about what they like, and we sort of get into it and have a good time with it. Hopefully people enjoy it. So it's called Mandatory Marvel and DC, but it's on the Comics in Motion network feed, where there is, as you well know, Scott, you've been on all of them these days. I think there's an absolute litany of shows on there. Lots of different stuff, whatever your taste is. There's something for everyone on there by some fantastic people who are doing some great stuff. So check it out. I think their Twitter page is at Comics in Motion P. So go on there. There'll be a link to the feed there. Whichever podcast app you use, it is available on there. So
and links down below. All the kind of links will be putting down below in the below this podcast. So go check it out. I agree. Comics in Motion do some fantastic stuff. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you really like what we're doing, check out your podcast catcher app. Leave us a review, 5 stars, 4 stars. Not really bother. Just get us a review. Gets us in there. Gets people more aware of us. And also, if you really like what you're doing, check out our Patreon. We're doing all kinds of bits and pieces over there. But one of the big things we're doing at the moment, I and Julian Darius are trekking through the Twilight Zone. Every week, we are releasing an episode of us talking about a different Twilight Zone episode. And then I've also got 30-minute thoughts, which is me talking for 30 minutes every month, Creator Corner, and all kinds of bits and pieces. Go check out what we're doing on the Patreon. But as always, Max, thank you very much for today. And ladies and gentlemen, we shall be back on the next episode. Bye.